Have you ever heard of Bubak? The sack man, as locals here refer to it. My family first arrived in Poland on a plane from Frankfurt, Germany. We arrived in a small town named Ustron, where we settled in for the next few years of my life. I can still remember my childhood home. It was this wonderful red brick hut at the end of the street near the woods. The transfer to a new country was, well, difficult to say the least. But with my grandmother holding my hand every step of the way, I managed. I can still remember her. Her toothy grin, that one mole on her nose. More than anything though, she loved her garden. The one thing that could still give her joy, apart from us of course, was the massive garden hidden behind the house's lengthy exterior. The garden had to be protected. That's why she had it. Sitting in the green shed, behind our bicycles and resting in between 6 large jars of jam, was a scarecrow. I can't exactly tell you what it was, but the thing always gave me an uneasy feeling. The aged straw it was made out of, or the tattered clothes of children it wore, didn't really bother me. It was its eyes. They were strained, human-like, and the colour was completely sickening. A rotting, almost fleshy pink. I always had a strange feeling about it. The way the eyes followed me. The way the thing's hands were always just too close to me. Still, I never actually broke down crying at the sight of it. But it was definitely strange. Then, it started to get in my head. I forgot this happened. Maybe when I was around 4, I had a dream. A very, very vivid dream. My little mind began racing. It's going to hurt her, I thought. It's going to kill Grandma and stuff her. How such ridiculous things came over me, I don't know. The logic of my idea wasn't important at the time. All I knew was that I had to stop it. Destroy it, even. In the middle of the night, around 11:30, I grabbed the head shears from the basement and made my way towards the shed. On my way, I slowly opened the door to Grandma's room. She was still sound asleep. Cautiously, I pushed into the shed door. A sudden jolt of energy, and it opened. The lunge forward startled me. My elbow came crashing through one of the windows. I collapsed in pain, clenching my teeth and observing my arm. Multiple shards of glass were wedged into my skin. The pain, for someone my age, was nearly unbearable. But I had to push forward. I had to save her. Our bicycles were in direct view now. The blood from my hand now made a small trail on the floor. I unhooked the bicycles, one by one, and moved them aside. My eyes widened. The scarecrow wasn't in its usual spot between the jars of jam. A cold hand clamped down on my shoulder. It was Grandma. Even though she was concealed in darkness, I could practically see her expression by the tone of her voice. She was angered, frightened even, and rightfully worried about me. Grandma dragged me inside the house. "Bastard child," she muttered under her breath. I reached down to comfort her. I wasn't yet aware that I was the cause of her stress. Both of her hands came crashing down on my shoulders. She had me in a firm grasp. "You listen to me," she whispered, her voice strained. "You will never go in there. Never. I nodded. My eyes began to swell up with tears. It was that exact moment that her anger wore away. "Come, I will make you 2 pierogi. Then you will go to bed." After I ate, Grandpa offered to read me to sleep. He nurtured me with a father's love, the kind of love I'd never received. He was reading me a tale about a vicious spider who ties its victims in an unbreakable string to preserve their flesh, and about the brave knight who ventured to slay it. The whole time, he looked sick, ghastly. I could see it in his eyes. So much so that he closed the book halfway through and wished me good night. "Grandpa?" I asked as he flipped off the light. "Where has the scarecrow gone?" His soft, fatherly smile faded. "Gone," he replied. "I burnt it." Confusion grasped me throughout the night. I rolled in my bed, wondering, how did he know? I'd never told anyone of my fear, nor did my face easily give it away. I was scared, for the first time in my life. Besides that incident, I had a pretty good childhood. My dad spoiled me with gifts every Christmas, much to my siblings' dismay. I was constantly surrounded by friends at school. But then, I turned 14. My life changed. The rivalry between me and my siblings, although not as childish, was just as intense. It even got to the point where one of the little hellions, Luca, nearly strangled me with a leather belt. Things were the worst between him and I. Then, one day, Dad proposed taking a hike. Luca wandered off the trail. Grandma insisted he would find his way back. Dad didn't buy it, and frankly, I didn't either. But I trusted Grandma. I kept my mouth shut. We never saw him again. Dad and I were ruined. I began seeing him, and not just in dreams. The funeral reception was relatively small, as Dad thought it would be appropriate only to invite close relatives. Mum had insisted that she come. Just the image of my mother brought Dad back to memories of the divorce. Merely thinking about it made him angry. The anger and depression haunted him night after night. Needless to say, he declined Mum's pleas. Dad fell into yet another depression, this one worse than the last. He barely left his room, much less go to work. Tensions between him and Grandma were high. They broke into fights. The fights, at first merely verbal spouting, escalated into violence. Police officers appeared at my house the next day, asking to speak to Grandma. Dad had disappeared in his car for a quick drive. He never came back. It was too much for me. I ran away, but eventually, I had to return home. Of my original 5 relatives, including Mum, only me, Nico, and Grandma remained. Grandma seemed unfazed by the disappearances, though she fiercely refused to speak about them. Nico and I shared only a handful of interests: soccer, mythology, and filmmaking. Mild depression plagued us. I was 16, and Nico was 10. Grandma encouraged us to bond. It was she who gave us the idea for the documentary. A massive film reel depicting the many supernatural events occurring throughout Poland. I went online and searched for Polish paranormal legends. No results. I deleted my search and retyped Polish haunted locations. 200 results appeared. One stood out in particular. Wędrowny Forest, Ustron, Poland. After plugging the exact location into my phone, I discovered it was only 2 blocks. Not as big as the woods near my home, but decently sized. My brother asked Grandma to borrow some of her filming equipment. Then we began. The first few minutes of the film were nothing exceedingly special. A picture of the house overlapped with Nico's voice, introducing us and the documentary. There wasn't really all that much to document. We basically just showed our viewer around the house. Nico and I agreed we'd save a trip to the forest for our finale. For now, though, a short clip of me walking down the basement steps near midnight would be satisfying. I wasn't entirely sure there would be any paranormal activity in our house specifically, but even if not, we hoped that the very idea would terrify our audience. Nico was too much of a coward to do it himself, so I went. To be honest, I was terrified too. Grandma usually forbid us from entering the basement throughout the day, much less in the middle of the night. Slowly, I inched my way down the stairs and into the dark abyss. My heart pounded with every step. I didn't have the courage to make it all the way down. Halfway was good enough. I sat down, positioned the camera so it was overlooking the basement itself, and waited. Nothing. The only sounds were my lengthened breaths and the boiler further downstairs. The whole concept suddenly seemed so childish and naive. But then, I heard something. I listened. The sound neared until an empty soup can rolled into view and stopped inches in front of me. I rose from my spot. My legs felt weak. It was as though they might give in at any moment. The hanging lamp attached to the ceiling flickered to life. A shadow overlapped the soup can. I inched away. With my camera still on, a figure came into view. A child. Its face a vacant blue. Its eyes were missing from their sockets. It reached for the can. It spotted me and smiled. I screamed in utter horror and practically trampled myself as I hurried up the steps. The creature gave chase. It carried a disgusting odour with it. My hand was on the doorknob, which I promptly twisted and pulled. 2 hands from upstairs powerfully grabbed me and pulled me up. It was Grandma, still in her cooking apron. The breaths I was drawing seemed unreal, as if I shouldn't have survived. I glanced over my shoulder. The creature had vanished into the darkness, and the light was now off. Grandma grabbed me by the ear and pulled me to my room. Believe me, I tried to reason with her. Nothing worked. I offered to show her the video. She ripped the phone out of my hand and threw it down the stairway. "Spoiled little child," she scolded. "This is exactly why your father died, Ethan. He never listened, even as man." She threw me into my room. Nico had already drifted off and was oblivious to the commotion. "You will stay in here until further notice. Is that understood, child?" I nodded. My face was wet and drained of colour. Grandma nodded and slammed the door shut. "Spoiled little child." I lunged over and hurled. My mucus-covered hands were still shaking. The odour had seemingly followed me. I reached into my pocket for a tissue. An aged fabric of some kind brushed against the tip of my finger. I pulled it out and examined it. It was a white piece of cloth with marker writing smeared across it. It read, "Kill the witch. Break the spell." My grandma's hostile attitude seemingly vanished at breakfast. I left my room despite her orders. Not that she seemed to notice. This incident left my head within the span of a few weeks. I convinced myself it was my wild imagination, or Nico trying to mess with me. Deep inside, I knew what had happened that night was real. I just couldn't face it alone. Nico and I continued our documentary. Grandma eventually gave us permission to hike a small trail I'd discovered near our woods. The visit didn't provide us with any paranormal sightings, but we did get some nice footage to show the viewers while we were talking in between clips. Finally, the time came. With Grandma's permission, we trekked into the woods and prepared to finish our project. The woods had a long-running stream which we planned to follow. We filmed our journey up the river before explaining to the viewers that we had to shut off the camera and head home for equipment. Nico slathered his arm in mud and, yes, animal feces. He'd grown a kind of attachment to the whole concept of the documentary and was willing to take strange risks to achieve it. Another 2 minutes of walking and we arrived at our destination. The ruins of a wooden hut near the heart of the forest. I turned on the camera and filmed myself walking towards the house, shaking it and speaking inaudibly for effect. The plan was relatively simplistic. Nico would hide inside of the house and attempt to grab me once I neared it, being cautious only to show his arm. Sure, it was a childish and unrealistic idea, but the thought of it made us hopeful that we could claim to have caught supernatural events on camera. My hand fell on the loose bronze handle attached to the hut's entrance. The bushes behind me began to shake. I turned off the camera and dropped it in frustration. "Damn it, you had one job." The rustling in the bushes continued. There was no answer from Nico. Ethan?" My throat closed up. I could feel the colour draining from my face. A slender, gloved hand reached through the bushes. Nico and I wearily backed away from the sight, still not entirely sure what to do. A pair of yellow eyes followed it. A pointed hat was visible as well. We ran. Adrenaline took hold of me. I shrieked wildly as someone began clawing at my back. I glanced over my shoulder. It was only Nico. We slowed to a halt by the opening of the woods, and we laughed. I don't know exactly what we found so funny. I still don't know, but we headed home. Grandma welcomed us at the door and barraged us with questions. "How was it? What did you see? Were you hurt?" The smile on her face seemed fake, superficial. Still, we denied having come across anything interesting during our trip. Just before bed, I made a quick trip to the shed and grabbed a Gatorade from the cooler. As I was closing the cooler lid, something caught my eye. I maneuvered across the creaking floorboards and unhooked our bicycles, moving them aside. There, lying in a sitting position between 6 jars of jam, was the scarecrow. It was still smiling. A cool autumn breeze came through my bedroom window, soothing my tense muscles as I lay in bed. Still, I wasn't calm. I thought over today's events. The whole day was a blur, and the memories swam in my head, crashing in every direction. I closed my eyes and slowly but surely drifted off into a deep sleep. I had a very strange dream that night. I can't exactly recall it though. What I can recall was waking up to the sound of someone pounding on the glass slide door leading onto the balcony. I jumped up, forcefully holding in my exhale. The pounding changed into a melodic tapping. The back of my throat clogged as I heard the door sliding open. It stopped with a thud on the end of the track. The floorboards began creaking, followed by footsteps. The footsteps got closer and closer until a shadow loomed over me. My breathing became short and frantic. I pressed my back against the bed's wooden frame. The shadow limped forward, now barely illuminated by my red LED lamp. It was a scarecrow, reeking of vomit and gasoline. Its eyes were empty, each with a yellow slit, acting like the thing's eyes. Stitches ran across its face, forming a sickening smile. It wore a brown hat and clothes, also reeking of gasoline. I couldn't move. My only thought was to bury myself in my covers and cower. The creature leaned forward. I could smell meat on its breath as its eyes narrowed on me. "It will be better this way," it hissed, flicking its black tongue. My instincts took over. I bolted out of the bedroom and hurtled into the darkness of the corridor. The creature stood, motionless, watching me. It gave a childish giggle and watched me disappear into the murk. I ran downstairs looking for Grandma, hollering her name. No answer, except for the sound of my own voice echoing off the basement walls. I passed the boiler room, past the storage closet. I stopped in my tracks. A rotting odour came over me, a familiar one. I spun around and saw something laying on the table, the apparent source of the smell. Even from such a short distance, the thing was blanketed in shadows. Luckily, a small ceiling lamp dangled above it. I pulled the short chain attached to it, turning it on. My eyes swelled. I wish I never turned that light on. I wish, oh how I wish, I never went into that damn basement in the first place. Luca was lying on that table. Not just Luca. Luca's corpse. Nearly completely covered in a strange material, holding together hay, wool and straw. Stitches ran across his rotting face, stretching his mouth into a smile. Only his face was visible. I had to conserve the body, Ethan. It was the only way. Grandma's voice seemed solemn, sincere. I pulled myself back into reality. Luca was dead. And now, after years of a mystery, I knew why. You murdered him. I spun around. Grandma donned a loving, motherly smile. Her posture was stretched and welcoming. "Oh, my baby, it had to be done." Tears began to stream down her face. Still, she continued. "Every inch She took forward. Her smile weakened. "He only feasts on the souls. But the souls cannot exist if the flesh disappears. I preserved him, Ethan. I'm saving him." I didn't believe her. Grandma stood still. Her face twisted into a mixture of disappointment and anger. "It had to be done," she whispered. "I had to protect the family." I just realized there was a second silhouette inches away from her, eyeing me from the shadows. The figure limped out of the darkness. Bubak's smile widened. He held out his arms as well, following after Grandma. He was mimicking her. I turned back to my brother's corpse, holding it in my hands. Grandma let out a soft chuckle. Bubak's hand was now grabbing hold of her shoulder. Tears streaked down her face. "He would have wanted this, Ethan. I know he would." I screamed and charged forward, knocking her from her feet. She collapsed onto the floor. Bubak let out a maniacal laugh and chased me up the stairs. The door was locked. The demon came close to me. His grin had vanished. His eyes were no longer a dirty yellow. They were human, practically bulging out of their sockets. I busted through the door and into the living room, and then towards the sliding back door leading into the garden. I didn't stop running until I reached a local supermarket, from which I contacted the police. The police brought me to some kind of rehabilitation facility where I spent the night. They moved me into a temporary foster home the next day. I couldn't eat for a few days, much less sleep. "It's over," I kept telling myself. But of course, it was never over. I couldn't really tell any of these psychiatrists what had happened. How could I? My name was Ethan Cocken. My grandmother was a druggie. At least that's what I told them. But the truth was always in my head, nagging. No, clawing its way out. Hell, that's why I'm telling you this. I never found out what happened after I ran until my 21st birthday, when I got a guy working for social services to cough it out. Obviously, he wouldn't give me the whole truth, no matter how much money I waved in his face. But from what he did tell, Grandma was found dead by the time police arrived. She was laying on the stairs, her stomach ripped open, with a cold smile on her face. She'd covered herself in salt, a natural preserver. They found Dad and Nico's bodies hidden in the wine cellar, also coated in salt. Years later, some friends and I returned to that forest. The hut had vanished without a trace, although we did discover something else. An enormous field of scarecrows, about 2 acres big, hidden behind a blanket of trees and bushes. I had my friend pick one out at random. Luca is still resting there today. I moved to the US sometime later. My life went on. I got a job, got married, had kids. But the afterthought of what could have happened continues to haunt me. I returned to my hometown several years later with my wife. The kids stayed at a nice inn, while she and I ventured into the forest. I told her I had something to show her. We stopped in the scarecrow fields, in front of the short one wearing the blue beret. She giggled gently and kissed me on the cheek. She said she was heading out to the car and that I should join her when I felt ready. I stood there for a while, looking up at it. My brother was alive. He always will be. I smiled.